Hello, friends. So, full disclosure, this video is a bit of a marathon. It's not a traditional book review, it's more of a deep dive. I know attention spans these days might as well be non-existent, but this book is so socially relevant that I couldn't possibly shorten this examination. If you're a woman or a man traversing the relationship minefield of modernity, I urge you to read this book. It provides a clear picture of the dangers of the sexual revolution and how those dangers may impact you. Although, I should warn you, some of the book's contents are harrowing and may terrify or trigger even the toughest out there. Louise Perry's book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, is a simultaneously riveting and disheartening analysis of the impact of the sexual revolution on society. Perry, a feminist herself, believes that our approach to sex needs more thought because, from her perspective, and one that is beginning to again be more universally shared, is that the outcomes from the sexual revolution have, on balance, been more negative than positive. Straight away, the book's foreword, which was written by Kathleen Stock, hits the reader with this, quote, "There's little doubt that contemporary sexual culture is destructive for younger women in particular. It sells them a sex bot aesthetic, pressures them into promiscuity, bombards them with dick pics and violent pornography, and tells them to enjoy being humiliated and assaulted in bed. It says that as long as they choose it, being exploited for money is sex work, and that sex work is work. It also tells women not to mix up sex with love and to stay disconnected," end quote. Another quote from the foreword, quote, "For we now live in a culture where, though it isn't taboo for a man to choke a woman during sex, or anally penetrate her, or ejaculate on her face while filming it, it is taboo for a young woman to express discomfort about the nature of the sexual bargain she's expected by society to make," end quote. Clearly, the foreword of the book paints a chilling, hypersexualized picture of a dystopian future that surpasses even one Orwell famously envisioned. We're warned that our failure to act could result in our posing as sleeping guardians while putting women, who are the critical and necessary nurturers in our society, at risk of being sacrificed to this individualistic and hollow revolution. The opening paragraphs are entirely sobering, particularly if you've been unaware of the recent trends in modern Western relationships and sexuality. So, I fully agree with Perry that we must act to prevent a potential catastrophic future of society. As someone who has dated in this era, I can personally attest to the high percentage of women under 35 who have fallen prey to debasing and devaluing sexual experiences with uncaring and indifferent men who themselves are also fodder in the sexual revolution. Despite the innate longing for intimacy and connection that these women have, such desires have overridden their judgment, leading them into the arms of unworthy men who have ultimately disappointed and hurt them in innumerable ways across many subpar relationships. In so many cases, the damage done occurred long before you might have ever met them. And sometimes it's so deep-rooted that it is virtually impossible to repair without serious self-work and therapy, and maybe not even then. Perry introduces the concept of, quote, sexual disenchantment, end quote, which I believe is the central and far-reaching tenet of this book. Perry argues that we live in an era where people are disillusioned with sex and relationships, leading to negative consequences for individuals and society as a whole. Perry suggests that sexual disenchantment is a result of the sexual revolution, which promised liberation and fulfillment, but ultimately failed to deliver on those promises. Instead, people are left feeling empty and unfulfilled. One of the key factors contributing to sexual disenchantment is the objectification of women in our sexualized culture, something that the overarching liberal order seems quite eager to promote and exploit. Sex and the City and 50 Shades of Grey, anyone? Women are often reduced to objects of desire rather than valued for their contributions beyond their physical appearance. This can lead to negative consequences for women's self-esteem and mental health, as well as contributing to a sense of disillusionment with sex and relationships. Perry also examines the tension between sexual freedom and social cohesion. Sexual freedom, while often described by the modernist politically correct establishment as superficially empowering on an individual level, can lead to a breakdown in social structures such as marriage and family. Perry suggests that individuals need to balance autonomy and social responsibility to create a cohesive society. As a reviewer of this book, I'm somewhat surprised that an increasing number of feminists are now keen to examine central planks of their worldview relative to social cohesion. The blank slateist mentality in which modern feminism seems to be firmly ensconced doesn't typically allow for breakout thinking, which would appear to be in any way supportive of a traditional view of sex and relationships, despite any positive value they provide, because typically this mentality takes the deconstructionist path. This book explores several themes and insights that are relevant to the debate between traditionalism and deconstructionism. Traditionalism is a worldview that emphasizes the importance of traditional values such as commitment, responsibility, and respect for social norms. Traditionalists believe that these values provide a framework for healthy relationships and can help to prevent negative outcomes such as divorce and other social problems. Perry's book aligns with this worldview in many ways. She argues that traditional values are important for creating stable families and communities, and she suggests that schools should teach students about the importance of these values. Deconstructionism, on the other hand, is a worldview that emphasizes the importance of individual autonomy and freedom from social constraints. Deconstructionists believe that traditional values are oppressive and limit individual freedom. They argue that individuals should be free to explore their sexuality without being constrained by social norms or expectations. This book also addresses the role of education in promoting traditional values. Perry argues that embracing these values is a key to creating stable families and communities, and that schools should be teaching these more traditional themes to children, and that policymakers should lead. Perry discusses the connection between traditional values and stable family units, noting that they provide a framework for healthy relationships and can help to prevent negative outcomes like divorce and substance abuse. If you're wondering about marriage overall in this context, I'll cover Perry's viewpoints on the subject in more detail later in the video. Throughout the book, Perry cites studies to support her arguments, such as the fact that exposure to sexualized media can lead to negative body image and self-esteem issues in women. Children who grow up in households with married parents are more likely to graduate from high school, attend college, experience less poverty, not engage in risky behaviors such as drug use. This book review is not meant to be exhaustive. I'm not covering every chapter in the book, but I'll cover what I believe to be the most important aspects relative to where there's typically been discordance between feminists and a traditional order that's understood the upsides of not destroying your body and mind by giving the best of yourself, ladies, the best of yourself, your innocence, your spirit, your sanctity, your hopes, and the essence of your being, and even your children, to those who are categorically unworthy of any of these things, and then suffering the lifelong consequences for it, all in the name of a reality-detached and illusory sexual liberation or sexual revolution. Perry introduces us to the concept of the sociosexuality gap and discusses how male and female desires don't always match at a population level, leaving many men frustrated by the lack of willing casual partners. While men are more likely to be interested in casual sex, women tend to be more selective and prefer committed relationships. This doesn't mean that there are more straight men than straight women looking for casual sex, which doesn't provide a social parity in mate availability. What's more concerning is society's response to this mismatch, encouraging women to adopt a more male-like approach to sex. Women are told to overcome their reticence and have sex like a man, imitating male sexuality en masse. However, Perry argues that this solution has been falsely presented as a form of sexual liberation for women when it serves male interests rather than female interests. This sociosexuality gap has contributed to a culture where sex is often viewed as a commodity or source of pleasure rather than an intimate connection between two people. This further reinforces harmful stereotypes and contributes to a culture where women are valued primarily for their physical appearance and sexual desirability, causing many women to play the game according to these arbitrary and shallow rules. Perry also highlights how adopting a male-like approach to sex can lead to negative consequences for both men and women. Perry argues that sexualized culture often encourages men to view sex as a conquest or a competition, rather than an intimate act. This can lead to devastating consequences for women who may feel objectified or pressured into engaging in this sort of sexual activity. Perry sheds light on the domination of our lives by technology and corporations, particularly in the realm of sexuality. She cites writer Venkatesh Rao, who describes a binary where you either tell robots what to do or are told by robots what to do, meaning that we either live above or below the algorithm. Living above or below the algorithm refers to having control over technology shapes our lives by being subject to its influence. And in a world where technology dominates our sexual culture and relationships, corporations and technology companies are keen to use algorithms and data analysis to manipulate our behavior and preferences. Perry argues that these entities are primarily interested in profit, which leads to harmful use of algorithms to control and influence us, especially as seen in the porn industry. And when we're subject to the influence of algorithms, we may find ourselves making choices that don't align with our values or our desires. This loss of agency and autonomy is especially damaging in areas like sexuality, where personal autonomy and agency are crucial. Perry notes that while technology was supposed to liberate females from oppressive gender roles, or at least part of the promise of technology, it has instead created new ones, making contemporary sexual culture destructive, especially for young women. This is notable with dating apps, where Tinder and its rivals are not dissimilar from shopping sites. The format encourages users to browse the available merchandise and select the preferred options from the comfort of their own homes, with very little effort and no intimacy whatsoever. Despite all this convenience, Tinder causes its users more unhappiness than almost any other app, according to Human Tech's app ratings. In a further iteration of cultural death grip syndrome, users report that dating apps manage to turn what should be an exciting experience into a dull and depressing one, because an overabundance of options does not increase the sexual thrill, but instead kills it. Perry believes that we're falling deeper into the trap of corporations using our data and preferences to manipulate us into certain behaviors and beliefs. And she believes it's time we become more mindful of the ways technology is shaping our lives and our relationships. But how do we take back the control of our lives and sexuality? The answer lies in her concept of logging off, both literally and metaphorically. This means being more intentional about how we use technology, seeking out alternative sources of information and entertainment, and being more critical of the messages we receive from media outlets. Otherwise, we risk losing our sense of agency over our own lives. Perry also examines how possessiveness and violence have become normalized in contemporary sexual culture. This idea is perpetuated by media and popular culture, which often romanticize jealousy and control as signs of true love. One distressing trend Perry highlights is, sadly, choking during sex. Although some may see it as a harmless kink or fetish, Perry concludes that it's actually a form of violence and can be deadly. Statistics show that choking during sex has become more common in recent years, particularly among younger people. Frightening. The book takes into account the prevalence and dangers of sexual strangulation in today's culture, especially in the context of BDSM and pornography. It argues that despite claims that consensual strangulation can be safe and enjoyable, medical evidence suggests that it carries significant risks, including brain injury and even death. The book questions the motivations behind strangulation, arguing that it often stems from a desire for power and dominance, rather than genuine affection or passion. Furthermore, it criticizes the normalization and glamorization of sexual strangulation in popular culture and media, suggesting that this trend may be contributing to the rise in real-life cases of non-consensual strangulation and violence against women. In her book, Bad Feminist, Roxane Gay explores her views on BDSM and strangulation. She argues that consent is crucial and BDSM activities like strangulation, and then when performed consensually, such acts can be enjoyable and harm-free. I'm not convinced. Although liberal feminists like Gay advocate that consensual strangulation is acceptable, a 2020 study reveals numerous potential injuries caused by non-fatal strangulation, including brain injury, cardiac arrest, stroke, and paralysis. It's disappointing to learn that strangulation is a relatively common act in forms of consumptive media like porn and in real-world modern dating, with men often being the ones strangling women. It's even more disheartening to realize that this trend is reflected in real-life cases of domestic violence, where the majority of victims are female and the perpetrators are male. Shockingly, a UK study reveals that almost half the women using domestic abuse services reported being strangled, choked, or suffocated by their partners. Moreover, a survey conducted in 2019 among UK women aged 18 to 24, this one is a hard one to take here, suggests that over half of them have experienced strangulation during sex. As a father, this saddens me because it means that many young women are being subjected to dangerous, harmful, and frightening behavior at the hands of, well, men. And this is all related to the glorification of the sexual revolution. According to Perry, women who seek out strangulation during sex are often motivated by a desire for power play and submission, rather than, in some cases, to experience physical sensations associated with oxygen deprivation. This is alarming, considering that men who strangle their partners during sex are mostly motivated by a desire to assert dominance and control. They're not motivated by a desire to express love for a woman when they want to strangle them. Perry also criticizes the portrayal of strangulation in popular culture, such as the 50 Shades series, as well in articles that suggest that strangulation can be safe and enjoyable when done correctly. This normalization of such dangerous behavior may contribute to the increasing prevalence of non-consensual strangulation and violence against women. To all the ladies watching this video, please understand that if your partner wants to choke you, it's not for your well-being. Strangulation is maladaptive behavior, and there's nothing good that can come of it. This statement should be known as axiomatic. Please star this and revisit if and when necessary. Perry also discusses issues like marriage, well-being, and family stability in the context of the sexual revolution. It's her perspective that marriage has numerous benefits for physical and mental health, including creating a stable and supportive environment that helps individuals cope better with depression and anxiety. As a result, married individuals tend to lead more fulfilled and happy lives, with a greater sense of purpose and meaning. However, Perry reminds us that marriage is a lifelong commitment deserving of utmost respect. And I can't say that I disagree. Moreover, Perry suggests that one of the benefits of a stable marriage is the safe and secure environment it provides for children's development. Married couples tend to form closer bonds, resulting in a shared responsibility for each other's welfare and that of their children. Indeed, research indicates that children who grow up in such environments tend to do better academically, socially, and economically than others who don't. Yet, as Perry points out, divorce can have profound negative effects on children, disrupting their sense of stability and security. To this end, policymakers should consider the positive impact that public policies supporting healthy marriages and discouraging divorce could ultimately have. On the topic of marriage and social cohesion, marriage, according to Perry, can inspire social unity by building robust families and communities. She points out that traditional marriages often encompass extended families or tightly knit communities that can lend help and support for each other. Furthermore, Perry brings to light how declining marriage rates may be causing societal disintegration by eroding the links between individuals and communities. She proposes that policymakers focus on promoting healthy marriages as a means of revitalizing social cohesion, something that a world without love painfully lacks. The sexual revolution, Perry argues, has not resulted in the freedom and equality it promised, but has instead led to negative social consequences, including a higher divorce rate, an increase in single-parent families, and a decrease in the overall stability of family structures. Perry uses specific statistics to demonstrate the impact of these changes on marriage, divorce, single-parent children, and single mothers. Perry acknowledges the cultural factors challenging traditional notions of marriage, such as hookup culture and casual sex. These factors are also contributing to declining rates of marriage among young people. Economic factors such as rising student debt and housing costs also make it harder for young people to get married. Perry also cites that in 1970, 89% of the people aged 20 to 24 were married, compared to only 32% in 2019. That's an over 50% drop in roughly 50 years. This underscores the importance of encouraging healthy marriage and family structures in society. Marriage is declining due to several other factors, such as the introduction of the contraceptive pill, decriminalization of abortion, and changing social norms around premarital sex. Unfortunately, this has led to an increasing number of men opting out of providing support to their children, even when they're in a publicly recognized relationship with the mother at the time of conception. These shifting attitudes towards fatherhood, especially outside the bounds of marriage, seem to suggest that many men feel they should not be held responsible for the financial support of any children if the mother decides to have the baby. Perry then moves on to the subject of divorce. Numerous studies have shown that the vast majority of individuals report moderate levels of marital happiness, with a smaller percentage experiencing very low or high levels of satisfaction. In the past, obtaining a divorce was a difficult and often stigmatized process, with individuals in unhappy marriages enduring lengthy legal battles or being socially ostracized. Shockingly, in the United States, almost half of all marriages end in divorce with, wait for this, with women initiating 80 to 90% of divorces. This increase in divorce rates is attributed to the shift in social attitudes brought on by the sexual revolution, which encouraged individuals to prioritize personal fulfillment over commitment and responsibility. Class disparity is evident, with higher income brackets having a greater percentage of intact marriages. Therefore, happy marriages increasingly appear to be limited to the well-to-do. Following the 1969 Divorce Reform Act in the UK, which was seeking to help a small number of unhappy couples, the number of divorces tripled in the decade after the bill was passed. However, the far-reaching effects of the reform were unforeseen. Despite continued attempts to improve divorce legislation, divorce rates continue to increase, albeit slowly, due to falling marriage rates overall. While improvements to divorce laws were warranted in cases of domestic abuse, they did not account for this reality of modern-day marriages. The majority of divorces take place when couples grow apart or fall out of love. Those who divorce often have their hopes dashed, particularly women, who are statistically more likely to remain single after a divorce than men are. Between 1/3 and half of UK divorcees express regret for having to end their marriages. Historically, couples dealt with the large gap between being happy and being permanently dissatisfied. Even successful marriages may be threatened by cultural norms that lead to high divorce rates. Couples lose faith in their marriage, as marriage vows are not legally binding. No-fault divorce laws have made it easier to file for a divorce, and some research suggests that newlyweds are less likely to invest in their relationships, such as paying for their partner's higher education or starting a family. The institution of marriage itself has changed as a result of the relaxation of divorce rules. Although the reforms of the 60s aimed to help people escape bad marriages and to reduce the social stigmas of divorce, they failed to anticipate all of these unanticipated consequences. Divorce has become more easily accessible and common, contributing to the end of marriage as a social institution. The marginalization of divorcees eased the way for future divorces, and the thresholds of relational dysfunction continue to fray. Perry also discusses the consequences of the sexual revolution in the context of motherhood, and her text emphasizes the negative impacts on women and children, particularly in the context of single motherhood and the increasing prevalence of deadbeat dads. It also highlights the role of the welfare state as a backup husband, strange concept, and the challenges faced by single mothers and their children in the absence of a stable, supportive partner. The increase in single mothers is another consequence of the sexual revolution, as more women are choosing to have children outside of marriage. Perry cites statistics showing that in 1960, only 5% of births were to unmarried women, compared to 40% in 2019. Perry argues that this trend is problematic because single mothers face unique challenges, such as higher rates of poverty, less access to resources, and increased stress related to balancing work and family responsibilities. Divorce and separation often lead to financial hardship, residential instability, and increased pressures due to limited time and money. Poor women are disproportionately affected by the negative consequences of single motherhood. Dependency on the welfare state, which provides basic necessities but lacks warmth and companionship. It's not a husband. The welfare state isn't the father. There's difficulty in finding a stable partner or support system due to the changed social norms and attitudes towards premarital sex and fatherhood. And Perry moves on to the issue of single-parent children. And she covers this fairly well, but I think this is a much larger issue than the book really gives credence to. But we'll cover Perry's views here. Perry also attributes this rise of single-parent children directly to the consequences of the sexual revolution. And the studies, unfortunately, indicate that children growing up without both biological parents face a range of challenges, including poor educational outcomes, higher rates of delinquency, and criminal behavior, and poverty. Fatherlessness can be particularly detrimental to a child's well-being. For boys, a lack of a father is associated with higher incarceration rates. So, they're much more likely to go to prison. While girls growing up in single-parent households are more likely to become teenage parents, or later, single mothers when they get older. Similarly, step-parents can create problems with increased risks of child abuse, stress, and resource deprivation. There's another entire topic for a video, the step-parent and its effect on stepchildren, which I may cover very shortly. It's not just about negative outcomes for kids. This is a much larger overarching component here that's directly related to the sexual revolution. Because in this culture that reveres the tenets of the sexual revolution, our society began to place way too much emphasis on physical attractiveness and sexual desirability. And as a result, younger people especially are very prone to enter relationships, to enter superficial relationships that don't last. And when these relationships do break down, the children that are born in these relationships as beneficiaries of the sexual revolution will most likely find themselves growing up without a father. In 1960, only 9% of children were raised in single-parent families, but today that number has swelled to over 25%. Let that sink in. This trend highlights a pressing need for us to rethink our cultural norms and place more emphasis on stable, long-lasting relationships that can provide children with essential emotional and economic support. In total, Perry's book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, offers a thought-provoking analysis of the historical movement and its implications for society. It's crucial to boldly analyze these themes and insights in the book to foster a deeper understanding of the complex relationship between the sexual revolution, interpersonal relationships, gender dynamics, and social norms. As someone who grew up when traditional relational views were the norm, I'm worried that despite Perry's pushback against the sexual revolution, there won't be a large-scale paradigm shift in collective attitudes. Nonetheless, I commend Perry for going against the modernist current and making one of the most intellectually honest attempts to address this clear and present social fallout in a thoughtful, well-researched, and reasoned critique of the sexual revolution and its largely abysmal consequences. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay healthy.